Could the Rugby World Cup be heading to the Middle East? And if it could, should it? Lot to unpack in this one, and I know you're going to let me know exactly what you think in the comments down below. I'll be there with you. Please get stuck in. I'm Tim. This is Egg Chasers. And as has been broken in the Times today, Will Kelleher with the story that the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar are launching a joint bid to try and host the Rugby World Cup in 2035 or 2039. This is a process which is going to really start motoring over the next year or two. Obviously, the next two World Cups in Australia in 27, the USA in 2031. But beyond that, could it be heading to more new uncharted territory and not an area that has any rugby pedigree whatsoever? And if it does, is that the right thing for the sport? This is ultimately, when you bubble it down, one of those conversations that is happening a lot in sport, in many different sports at the moment. That balance between finances, cold hard cash, and the soul of a sport, and those two things coming together to decide what is the right thing. We've already seen the Football World Cup going to Qatar. We've seen Live Golf completely changing the face of that sport. Formula One and boxing as well with Saudi Arabia. One thing's for certain, there's some very, very deep pockets, and rugby is on the agenda. And this is something that's been growing for a while now. We've got the Qatar Airways, sponsors of the Qatar Airways Cup. Those fixtures quite often involving South Africa, sponsors of the URC and of the British and Irish Lions this summer. You've got Emirates heavily involved with World Rugby at the Rugby World Cup, all over the referees. So this, and of course, most notably, the fact that Qatar is going to be the venue for the finals of the Nations Championship in years to come, in a massive financial deal for the sport. It seems to be only moving one way. Is it just a matter of time that it comes for the Rugby World Cup? And should we just say, let's take the money? I can see the argument, but I can definitely see the arguments to the contrary as well. As I say, a lot to discuss. This isn't the first time we've heard of this, by the way. This was initially first mentioned a couple of years ago when Saudi Arabia were talking and making really positive noises about how they specifically wanted to host a Rugby World Cup. Since then, it looks like it's morphed into a multi-country bid involving the UAE, Qatar and Saudi Arabia. It does throw up some problems for World Rugby if they were even to consider this. Firstly, they would have to change the rules of their own competition, because up until now, every team at the Rugby World Cup, including the host nations, had to qualify for the Rugby World Cup through their world ranking and through competitions in repêchages and stuff for the people that fall outside of the automatic qualification spots. Now, currently, the highest ranked nation out of the three is the UAE, who are 48th in the World Rugby rankings. I mean, we've seen the mismatches that can happen at Rugby World Cups when the minnows come up against one of the big guns. How ugly could it get if 48th ranked UAE were playing against the All Blacks or the Springboks? Could be a car crash. But it gets worse when you look at Qatar, who are ranked 87th, and Saudi Arabia don't even have a world ranking. So World Rugby are going to have to change their own rules in order for this to actually happen. And probably what would happen is they would expand the competitions to become a 32-team competition. Is that the right thing to do? When you sort of wonder whether less is more and scarcity has a value and just best against best rather than these 100-point drubbings. Also, when you look at the impact it would have on the season, the other 11 months of the year, because just like with the Football World Cup, this would have to be played in December or January. It could not be played in the usual spot of September or October because it's too hot there in the Middle East. I mean, it's pretty damn hot in December and January, but it would be more bearable, and that's going to have a massive impact on the domestic leagues, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, the top 14, the Premiership, the URC, the Six Nations. Could a Six Nations Championship really happen just a few weeks after a Rugby World Cup finished? Would it have to be moved from its usual February and March position? Now, some may argue, well, hey, if this is a catalyst for a conversation about an aligned global season, could end up being a good thing. But there are some problems to be solved, is the point. And it's deeper than that, and it's more fundamental than that, isn't it? because this is kind of about fairness and what feels right and the friction that is having with cash.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good.
I guess the biggest challenge for the UAE, Qatar and Saudi Arabia is going to be getting enough votes to actually win the hosting duties for the Rugby World Cup. There are 52 votes that get given to the nations around the world. 2 votes in Asia, the area that the Middle East is wrapped up in World Rugby's world map. 2 votes they can probably count on. Beyond that, how are they going to persuade the other nations? Well, I guess the answer to that is that persuasion can come in many different forms. And therein lies the issue. I'll tell you what I'll do. Let me give the case for a Rugby World Cup in these countries. Firstly, number 1, it would grow the game. There's no doubt about that. This would be a new frontier for rugby. None of these 3 teams, as I've mentioned, have ever qualified for a Rugby World Cup before, and they would be hosting one, which would definitely have an impact on rugby in that area. There's a lot of expats that are in Dubai, for example, but the native population, rugby does not register. And yeah, okay, if you're making the case for it, this would be a positive move on that front. Second point in favour of this, most people watch the Rugby World Cup on TV. Most rugby fans don't go to the Rugby World Cup, so maybe we should focus on the spectators at home rather than the people in the grounds. Look, I'm making the argument for it. I'm not saying this is what I think. Point number 3, cash. Simple as that. Cash. The oil-rich states in the Middle East have got a lot of it. The tap would be turned on of some giant sovereign wealth funds, and Rugby's Cup would get filled in the way that golf and boxing and Formula One and football has. And you could do, and the argument would be made, you can do a lot of growing the game with all that money. And the final argument you will hear is that allowing rugby to be more prominent in the Middle East will be a force for good, using rugby values to promote positive changes in human rights and promoting Western values in the Middle East. The other side of the argument that will be made for sure is that, well, first and foremost, this is sports washing, plain and simple. It's using money to legitimise via sport governments which have been involved in huge human rights abuses over the years. Another argument, fans don't want this. I think fans around the rugby world want to see proud, developing, existing rugby nations given the opportunity to host the pinnacle of the sport. Thirdly, of those countries, there are some that really, really deserve it. Now, I have amazing memories of watching the Football World Cup on the telly when I was a kid in Italy, and it was amazing. And those stadiums, some of those historic cities, and more recently, a rugby-mad public. They've been in the Six Nations since the year 2000. Don't Italy deserve, and wouldn't a World Cup in Italy be amazing, whilst breaking new ground in the footprint of the Rugby World Cup? And the same in terms of developing nations goes for Spain. They have the infrastructure, and maybe a joint World Cup with Portugal, 2 of the emerging nations in world rugby. That could be an amazing venue for rugby fans to travel to. The beaches, the cities, Madrid, Barcelona, Bilbao and the rest, Valencia, what a country. And Lisbon, Portugal, that means to miss you out there. The beaches, the food, the infrastructure, it's all there. So those are some brilliant European contenders, and Ireland would like to be considered as well. There are issues with infrastructure. I don't think they have the hotels to host a Rugby World Cup, the roads and the public transport and all the rest of it. But maybe with Wales and Scotland, they could pull that one off, and maybe that would be due as well. And then further afield, South Africa, still smarting from not getting the Rugby World Cup in 2023. They feel in a corrupt fashion France ended up getting the World Cup. They haven't had one since 1995. And for such a rugby-mad country that has seen so much change, rugby could again be another force for good in the country of South Africa, as it has been in the past. And beyond that, we've seen, or we're going to see in 2031, a Rugby World Cup in the USA. What about South America? Argentina in the Rugby Championship, get to Rugby World Cup semi-finals regularly. One of the great teams. Can't rugby do a little bit more to help uplift that country and the others in South America that are doing so well? Uruguay and Chile, Brazil as well are developing. What a area of the world for rugby fans to go and enjoy. The passion, the culture, the cities, and it's about time. So you can't go to all these places and have a Rugby World Cup in the Middle East. And a Rugby World Cup, coming around to my own opinion, just doesn't feel right. And the only reason to go is the same reason for golf and boxing and Formula One and football going there, is money. And maybe it's cynical of me to say so, but I think that will probably end up winning the argument. Well, it certainly will at some point. I think it's irresistible. And I have no confidence in the administration of rugby to manage to fight it. And when I look at people like Bill Sweeney here in England, when you look at the scandal that the Toulouse management are currently embroiled in, and you see this all over the place. And I think money does talk. Money probably will talk, but I don't think it should. I would much, much prefer to see a Rugby World Cup in Argentina, in Spain and Portugal, or in Italy, or in South Africa. And I think that would do a far, far greater job for growing the game and creating a spectacle that fans really, really want to see than a trip to the Middle East. But the pockets are far too deep that I imagine it's a when, not an if, the Rugby World Cup gets taken there. We will see. Let me know what you think. And hopefully I've started a bit of a conversation. Let's get stuck in down below, and I'll see you on the next video.